All right, it's 7 o'clock. Going to call to order the zoning board of appeals meeting for Tuesday, July 11th, 2023. Lisa, if you could call the roll.
Brown,
Present.
Clinton, here. Henricks,
Here.
Nibbs,
Here.
Shaw, no. Here.
Okay, approval of the minutes from June 6th. Anyone have find anything they want to correct?
I didn't see anything wrong with them, so I will make a motion that we approve the minutes of the prior meeting.
I'll second it.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes? Aye.
I
abstain. All right, old business. Case number 869, request for a parking variance at 1050 Bayview Road. This is a case we discussed at our last meeting, and it was we had asked for the applicant to take it to the planning commission first, and then after the meeting, we realized that we needed to make a ruling on the variance. So if we could have Ms. Kaiser, if you could maybe just do a little recap. I think Jim, you were the only one who wasn't here, so if you could just kind of do a quick summary.
Certainly. So. Is this recording? Okay, good. So last time I was here, we talked about the fact that the Killens Corporation has been expanding and growing within their building for the last 10 years. And with that has grown the number of employees, and they have expanded their retail area, the number of office people, and as well as manufacturing and production that is in the lower level. What you can't see from driving by on Bayview is that there is a whole 25,000 square feet that is below ground that initially, when the building was purchased, was just used for warehousing. So now that they have been able to grow and are providing new employees for all of their new manufacturing areas, we need new parking for those people. Currently, we have we're required to have 132 parking spaces, and we're requesting 181. Of those 181 parking spaces, 8 of them would actually go to the PMP building because that's part of an easement that is arranged between the Bobbin property and the PMP building. So that leaves 173 parking spaces for Killens to use. When they bought the building, we did not have a restriction on parking, and this is the first time we've come across where we've been told you have a maximum amount of parking that you can have. So in trying to grow the business and grow what we have, I feel that the zoning ordinance has inadvertently changed the amount of parking that we can have for office space and retail space to a standard that is less than what we would be accustomed to. And I did a little research of what Emmett County allows, and they allow 1 parking space per 200 square feet of office. And this current zoning is 1 per 350, which is a 43% reduction in our parking capacity. Retail is for Emmett County is 1 per 200, we're at 1 per 400. So rate, according to what I feel is like we would normally be able to have, we're kind of cut off right out of the gate. So we're looking to have these additional parking spaces because currently the overflow parking is occurring at the lower level of the Tallberg site. They've got 41 cars parked down there. They've also got cars parked up on the top. And we need to eliminate that parking and get everybody together. So that is the decision to buy to take down the Bobbin building, to take down the Vans business building and build another parking lot that looks congruent with the rest of the parking next door at PMP and at the main Kilwin site. And so we're asking for variance to allow us to have these additional parking spaces, which will allow us to have the employees that we have. Oh, and I think at the last zoning board of appeals meeting, there was some questions regarding the drainage of the property, and we have since gone back to Benchmark Engineering. We did a full drainage program so that we could make a submittal to the Planning Commission. And we have gone through and done an underground drainage system that would allow it to not be the runoff would not occur on the surface going to the catch basin. It would occur underground. And that is, as far as I know, is in line with what the city wants to have. I think that was it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any?
I have a question. It was also brought up about creating some kind of a sound barrier by some neighbors, if there's going to be increased traffic. Is that been addressed in your plans?
Well, the increased traffic of the employees would not occur at the north part of the property. They would come across behind what's currently the Cortez Flynn property, and they would start walking on that front sidewalk of Kilwin's. So the existing level of activity that is happening right now with the trucks and what's happening along the north side wouldn't change. We basically, the edge of the curb of the north side of the property is the property line. And that is exactly the way it was when it was purchased from Olson's. So there's not an additional inch of property for us to plant a hedge or anything at all. And I know that there are everybody has, these issues with noise and living, but this is what happens anytime we put a commercial district right next to a residential district. I did bring these concerns up with Don McCarty, and their team is aware of that, that the noise there is impacting the neighbors. But I don't think there's not a place we could build a wall. There's not another inch of land. So, I mean, there's city property there. So, yeah.
Is your proposal to have one entryway into the requested parking lot area off of the highway?
That is right. Currently, there are 2 curb cuts. I have eliminated one of them and brought it down to just one single curb cut.
Is that area intended for staff, customers, or the offices, the other offices in the?
It's intended for staff. Customers would pull up and park right by each of the respective buildings.
I'm not gonna beat this issue too much further, but you today and before, I think you mentioned that your current employees are parking on a dirt parking lot that's what is it, to the north of the facility?
Northwest.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they walk from there over to the work site. And some park up above in the, was that Tallberg's before?
Yes, it was.
Okay,
Yes.
so some are parking up there.
Yes.
So is the request for the convenience to the staff to allow them to park and walk closer to the Kilwin's office?
The request is to take the property that is currently where Kilwin's resides.
Right.
That piece of property sits by itself, and we would merge that piece with the Vans Business Machines and the Bob Inn site. We would merge all 3 of those together. the Talberg site would remain independent and not merged.
And if I can interject, but is it still owned by the parent company of Kilman's? That site?
Yes,
Sorry, I just wanted to
So
clarify that.
both to the north and to the south.
it's
west,
east
you
and
call
west.
it,
Yeah. east
On
and-
each
yeah,
side.
Yes,
That's operated and it sounds like essentially owned. The totality of that by Kilman's.
no,
And you're using the up parking lot and the dirt parking lot.
and this is why Don is here tonight, is because I thought it would be helpful if he could explain how the business is separated from the land. And I know that you kind of honed in on that Talberg property last time,
Yeah.
but that Talberg site is not a good use of land for us to turn it into a parking lot. That is not a that is a very valuable piece of property to become parking.
That dirt parking lot behind.
Yes, it's contiguous to the land that goes up the bluff
Oh.
and goes to the highway.
So it's just the business's decision that let's expand in the other direction and put our parking on that side. And
I'm trying to help you understand that the business corporation of Killen's does not own the land.
who does?
May I have you speak? Sure. Thank you.
So I'm not sure what the question is. Can you tell us who you are?
Oh, I'm Don Riccardi. Yeah. Representing the landlord, would be the landowner.
I think for me, what I'm having a hard time understanding, I'm so, to be on, sorry. The thing I'm having a hard time understanding, and maybe it's the same for you, is that if you currently have 40 available parking spaces on a surface lot contiguous to your property, you've been able to use it all this time. Why do we need to get rid of those for the sake of adding all these spots as a new parking lot? When, you know, a dirt parking lot is probably a little better. I don't know environmentally, but I mean, I guess that's the question, is that we're being asked to give a variance of 49 parking spots, and it sounds like you have 40 that you could already use. And I think that's the hard thing I'm having I'm trying to
Yeah,
understand.
so there's Swirls of Summer, which is 950 Bayview. Then there's a Talberg, which is 1000 Bayview. Then there's Killen's campus, let's just call it the old Olson's campus, which is 1050 Bayview. And that includes the Cortez building. And then to the right of that, or going to the east, would be 1100 Bayview, which is the old Vans building. And then going to the right of that is the old, what's that called? Thank you, Bob Inn, which is 1150, I believe. So basically, you got one big hunk of property. The question is, where would you like to park? And what's the highest and best use of the spaces? So we've determined in our mind that we have 2 parcels there, or we actually have 4 parcels. And right now, people are just parking wherever they want to park. Okay. It's not that great looking, so on and so forth. So we've determined that the best use, the best place to put the parking lot is on the old Vans and on the old Bob Inn. So you've got a couple of not so nice buildings there that are pretty unrentable right now. And our proposal is to tear those down, put in some really nice looking parking, you know, to code or whatever. And that's where then our team would park there. What that does is it gives Killen's a campus, and we would combine those parcels. So now you wouldn't have 3 parcels there. You have the Killen's campus encompassing. It would also include the Vans and the Bob Inn building. So it'd be one big parcel there. So that whole big parcel would be leased to Killen's. Killen's would have everything they need for the conceivable future to operate there, and they, you know, probably no more expansion in that location. And that would leave the other parcel, which was the original parcel, which was originally not part of Killens, which nobody parked on, that leaves a separate parcel there. And so that's what the proposal is, and that's why we're asking the variance. We can park at Vans right now, I believe. We would just like to make it look nice, so, I mean, there's people parked there right now, maybe there's only 30 spaces or whatever. I mean, we can park there, think we can do whatever we want, because there's parking, so we would just like to clean it up, make it nice, so when you drive by, hey, there's Killens, hey, there's their parking, it looks really nice, just like we did before, when we took over the Olson's building 15 years ago. Didn't look very nice. People were kind of up in arms, like, what are you going to do there? Well, I think we can get real nice, done a good job. We don't intend to do anything other than make the city better by, combining these parcels, putting the parking where it makes the most sense to put the parking, and keeping that other parcel separate. At some point, there's probably a better use for that. We don't have any current plans for that. But right now is the time to split that off, because we're in a situation where the business has grown to the point where we need to make a definitive decision on where we're going to park those cars.
Anyone have any questions? Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment on the Killens?
Well, I would like to,
If you could come up to the mic and tell us who you are and your address.
sure. Good evening, I'm Trish Garber. I live at 16 Bell Avenue, and I'm probably one of the most affected because I'm in that lovely little secret street that is behind the Killens campus. And while I can't speak for my neighbors, I can say with certainly authority from the Garber standpoint that we have absolutely no objection to this, and that the Killens have been nothing but a wonderful addition to the area. So do we like all the cars? No, but we like the prosperity and they are wonderful people. So as far as we're concerned, there's no problem with this move. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Any other public comment on the Killens application? All right, we'll close public discussion and talk about it amongst the board.
I have a question. Maybe for the two of you. I remember at our hearing last time, before we started our discussion, the prior chair of this board, Lori Paul, had referenced section 1704(6). And I gotta find it now. Sorry, you have it. So I don't put tabs. And it's about off-street parking and driveway curb cut standards. And it says to minimize excessive areas of pavement that contribute to higher rates of stormwater runoff, exceeding the parking space requirements of subsection 1704H in non-residential districts shall be prohibited. So my question is, given that language, do we have the authority to grant a variance for parking spots to exceed the capped number in the ordinance?
John Michaelangeli, planning consultant. That's actually a question for the planning commission, not the zoning board. of
Okay.
appeals.
So, and that was sort of the secondary question I had then, is that could we then proceed with the premise that we have the authority to grant a variance, grant or deny whatever variance we might do, but make it subject to the planning commission's review of our authority to do what we've done? Is that how it would work?
I would recommend that the zoning board of appeals review the case and base your decision on the current facts. The
Okay.
planning commission is going to be taking a look at the site plan and the storm drainage and the access to the parking lot as part of their responsibility.
Okay, but I guess I'm asking just from a legal out of the gate question, given that language.
zoning board of appeals, in my opinion, should not make their variances contingent upon what the planning commission is going to do.
No, but I mean, do we have the authority to grant a variance?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
and,
but-
and given that language, we can still grant
The
a variance.
planning commission would be taking a look at that issue with the
Okay,
stormwater.
all right, that's what I wanted to know.
Would we not, in advance of the planning commission looking at the whole matter, would we not benefit from having our city council attorney look at this language? Normally, if it's something as clear cut as this shall be prohibited, that would be the end of the story. And I don't know why it isn't. But
And I would say, I would not want this applicant to have to come back a third time. I mean, I totally understand that. But I guess at some, and I have no problem if we go through and decide this on the merits, but I do feel at some level, it still seems like, is this a matter for city attorney to issue a legal opinion on this language? I'm not sure. But yeah, I don't think we want to have this applicant come back. I would still like there'd be a hearing on the merits. But I just didn't know how this should be addressed. Pardon me?
Sure.
Can you come up though and turn your mic on and talk? Thank you.
One small thing, I served on a zoning board for 12 years.
Hmm.
I've written zoning ordinances.
I'm sorry, I
I said
can't hear you.
I've served on a zoning board for 12 years and I've written zoning ordinances. And I think that what you might be looking for is how can we have an exception to something that says shall be prohibited? And what it says here is that to minimize excessive areas of pavement that contribute to higher rates of stormwater runoff. That is what we're doing by providing this subsurface drainage system. It
And
won't-
that may be,
It
in
won't
which case, then
contribute
what
to
you're
that.
saying, review by the planning commission to determine the adequacy of what they're proposing will be addressed.
Yes, that's all I wanted to say.
Okay. All right. I'm comfortable, at least I am comfortable going forward then with the understanding that there is some sort of review then of what we do in terms of that language. Okay. Thank you.
I'll go ahead and give my thoughts on the request. In light of the criteria that we're supposed to follow, and with respect to doing something as significant as deviate from an existing ordinance, that's the as we all know, that's the general goal, focus, value to the city. So at least when I go through the criteria, on the first factor is the need for the variance due to unique circumstances, such as exceptional narrowness, etc. I don't find that to be present in this case. As we've heard the description, they have they own the property on each side of, we'll call it the Kilwins campus. Their staff parks in all those areas, including the areas behind Tallberg and on that dirt parking lot, parking up above on their paved parking lot. The desire to make the campus, we'll call it more concise, more tight by just using the, we'll call it the Kilwins campus and the area that is currently Vans and Bob Inn. To me, that does not present a sufficient need. They will continue to do what they have been doing, owning all that acreage and having their staff park in various locations. So I don't find that factor one has been satisfied. I don't think that on number two, I don't see that that's weighing one direction or the other. On factor three, though, factor three is the practical difficulty was not created by an action of the applicant. First, there is not a practical difficulty in my estimation. And if there was, I do believe that it was essentially created by the decision of the owner to, let's say, over time, massively expand the personnel on site, the production staff, and the percentages of increase of the staff were laid out in the materials. They're staggering, and it was a decision that they could have made to, well, let's cap our increase in production workers at this level. So we don't have parking issues or for other reasons, or let's cap it at that and expand, at our facility south of town. So the practical difficulty, I don't believe exists, and it is, if there is one, it is of the decision making by the applicant to expand staff to the high levels that they currently have. But again, there seems to be on the whole acreage that they own adequate parking at this time. Factor four is the requested variance is the minimum variance necessary to grant substantial relief, while at the same time minimizing any adverse impacts to the other property owners in the general neighborhood and zoning. I don't think that I heard how the minimization of the noise issue was proposed to be addressed. But I don't find that the variance request is compelling under factor four. Number five is the request, if granted, to cause substantial detriment to the public good or substantially impair the intent and purpose of the ordinance. I am concerned about section 1704 that almost is designed to, I believe, to let's not pave over everything that's possible to do so, generating runoff problems. I think we have a bigger problem, a big problem in actually getting past 1704. And I do believe that the noise remains an issue, that it is a public good to have more green space and not pave over every location that we have the opportunity to pave over, generating a range of negative externalities. Lastly, the sixth factor is the strict application of the regulations would result in peculiar or exceptional practical difficulties. The strict application of the regulations as they exist now, frankly, aren't creating exceptional practical difficulties for the applicant. Their parking is available to them on all the parcels that they own, and so it will be for those reasons that I don't believe that the approval of the request is appropriate today.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
may I add some information that I think is part of the, should be part of the discussion. We have to put this into a more of a larger context. When the current owner of Kilwins bought the property, when it was the Olson Plaza, it was prior to this new ordinance going into effect, which provided a minimum and maximum. When they bought the property, they bought it with the understanding that the parking was a minimum requirement. And if that ordinance was in effect today, they wouldn't be here because they would have the right to add parking. So the ordinance amendment is the one that has caused the hardship and the difficulty. Basically, what we're saying is that in a roundabout way, we're going to limit business, not based on their capacity to provide income to the community, but we're going to limit business if they can provide the parking or minimize the parking, which is, to me, is the wrong policy issue for the basis of a decision. The other part is the role of city planner. When we take a look at the parcels that are on the map, they own 30 or 332, 31, 409, 425, and 424. You can see by the aerial photograph that the parking is distributed through all four parcels, which is an underutilization of the properties. So from my perspective as the city planner, I would prefer that they aggregate the parking into a campus and leave parcel 332, which was the ice cream establishment, and 331 as parcels that would be subject to redevelopment for the community. It is really a gross underutilization of requiring them to use all four parcels to spread their parking out when this city has limited property for redevelopment. In particular, those two parcels that are closest to the lake probably have some of the best views of the bay. And it seems inappropriate to me that we would require them to use those parcels to park cars. So I think the zoning board has to kind of look at this in its entirety in terms of the utilization of the property in the future, the aggregation of parking in a campus, and the fact that the reason why they're here is because the ordinance amendment capped their parking and basically is not allowing them to grow. And I don't know if that was really the intent of the mid-max requirement. I do think if the mid-max requirement would have been in place when they evaluated the feasibility for Olson's, and they knew that they were only going to have X number of parking, they may not have made the business decision to redevelop that property, because it says you can only have this much parking, therefore a business at some point in the future is going to be capped. And I think that's the issue. The hardship was not brought on by their success in business. The hardship was brought by the amendment to the zoning ordinance, which capped their opportunity for parking.
I have a question. I have something to clarify. You had said Kilwins does not own the property. So they're just renting then. So the applicant then is the landowner? Was this what?
Yeah.
And you represent the landowner. And so all these parcels are the same landowner. But we're looking at using multiple parcels for one tenant to use for parking?
Correct, when Killen's purchased that, they purchased the original Killen's was on the blue outline space there. right?
Mhm.
So Killen's does not own any of that property.
Mhm.
Killen's utilizes the space that's outlined in blue. Killen's needs more parking.
Mhm.
They have a friendly landlords, and the landlord has said, park wherever you want.
Mhm.
Now, in view of the expansion and, you know, the opportunities that may be available here or there, wherever. We're looking at this and saying, where does it make the most sense as a landlord and as a tenant?
Mhm.
With the parking for expansion because of what the man said here. By, gentleman on the right, so. That's the situation.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just curious though, that if they're gonna start, if they do expand the parking to the north into the plot next to it to the right. But that's not technically their plot. I mean, could there be future projects then that would take that parking away from them?
Only with the read.
I mean, are they doing an agreement with you as a landlord that they get to keep that parking for a certain duration or anything?
Yeah, that's irrelevant, I believe.
Okay.
What happens on the other parcels is irrelevant. What's important is what's inside the blue right now
Mm-hmm,
and where that parking is gonna go.
okay,
We're
but,
asking that parking, we're asking that the parcels on the right,
mhm,
be granted exception. So that can all be made parking. And by the way, if you look at that right now,
Mhm.
you can see a little bit in the upper right and the lower right hand corner.
mhm,
It's green. Everything else is either got a roof over it or pavement on it.
mhm.
There's very, very little green space there.
Thank you.
And
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
and Jessica, and by adding, by turning the east parcels into parking. Because you can't have a piece of property that's just parking.
Mhm.
Per Lisa's direction, we have to take parcels 24 and 25 and merge them to one. So that will all be.
So that will all be, okay, that will make more sense then, because that's why I'm like, why are you letting them park somewhere where you might lease to someone else? Yeah, okay,
So then that goes with the building.
okay, so is that part of your planning commission appeal? Okay,
So then 31 and 32 can then stand alone.
okay.
There you go.
And I had one more question for you while you're there. Do you have an account as to the current number of spaces you have?
Yes. Let me just. one moment.
How many?
132.
The current is the 132? Okay, all right, thank you.
I just wanted to make a comment as well. I'm trying to find the language. I'm struggling. However, I do know it exists, and that is what they are currently doing with their parking on the former Tallberg's lot is technically not permitted per the current ordinance,
Okay.
because it is a vacant parcel. There's no business in that building, as
Right.
is the same for the
Okay,
Bob
That
Inn
makes sense.
and the old Vans business.
Okay.
So they have to basically combine those properties to create that additional parking.
So you're saying legally they should be parking on their own
parking on
property?
Any of those three parcels,
Okay.
only on the Kilwins lot itself. And the parking is, as Elaine said, for Kilwins, however, Cortez Flynn is also on that property. I don't recall if there are any others, but they have, you know, customers and employees that are also parking there as well. So it's the multiple uses as well.
Okay, I think that makes a big difference to know that. It'd be great if you can find that, because I know myself, looking at your needs and what you're asking for, and the fact that you're gonna be going for. Forward with planning regarding the water runoff. I don't see too much of a problem, but going through like our checklist for. Granting a variance, there's not too many boxes we can tick yes for you on, so I think that makes a big difference when we look at that, knowing. That they're technically not supposed to be parking in those other places.
Could you clarify that for me? We'll call it parcel 31, the Hallberg there.
This one here.
This one, yeah. Sounds like the existing actual landowner the lessor is readily allowing Kilwin's staff to park on parcel 31.
Correct.
You think that's illegal for the lessor of that property to allow them to do
It
it?
doesn't matter who allows it. We have the same issue currently with Bay Street Orthopedics or Bay Street's Urgent Care. They own the neighboring parcel and they're in the process of combining those two parcels because the old is a vacant business and they're using that as parking and it's not permitted for a vacant parcel to become a parking lot. It has to go through the process of approval.
Has there been any ordinance enforcement or citation on that illegal parking?
We just recently had a code enforcement officer join our staff in May, late May. And it's been in the process. It's not a quick process, but the occupant of that property or the owner of that property is aware and they're working on the procedural process of combining those parcels and creating that parking plan.
Anyone else have any
I
questions, comments?
have a comment. I had actually thought of what you had remarked about the fact of when the applicant purchased this property, that there was a minimum parking requirement, there was no maximum parking requirement. And I do see that as a concern for us in terms of how we deal with this, because if you buy property and you're told you have to have so many spots, but you're never told you have a cap, and clearly Kilwin's had a long-term business plan that looked for expansion. I would see that as the practical difficulty also, that the change in the ordinance altered their expectations as to how many parking spaces they could have. And so for me, that does become the practical difficulty in this case. I think from there, though, I agree with your comment that there's not a lot of boxes that we can tick, given the very rigid requirements we have. But for me, what it comes to is that I am, and I haven't totally got myself there yet, but what I would be thinking is that I would be inclined, if we were to grant a variance, I would grant it for what the 2009 the 159 spots that would have been the number that they would have been allowed back in before the changes were made to the ordinance. That would be, to me, sort of a fair compromise between, you know, what maybe is perfect for them. And part of my thinking in that regard is that, well, the consolidation of the parking, I understand, is a great idea. It's good for the business. It's good for the practical uses of the property. What I haven't heard anything about in this discussion is, has Kilwin's looked at any other ways to address the parking crunch? Have they considered compensating employees to carpool or to hire some sorts of, van service from more distant lots where people could park and then come to work together? I mean, I think that's the way of the future. I would like to see more green options, which I think, we are trying to encourage. And I think that's what the 1704 language is talking about, is we are concerned about just more cars, more parking. So I'm sort of at that point right now where I feel that given the changes in the ordinance subsequent to their purchase of the property, I would be inclined to grant a variance to match the numbers, that is being the 159. But I would appreciate anybody else's comments on that.
I tend to agree with you on the issue of the practical difficulty of the change in the ordinance during the occupancy by Kilwin's. So for that reason, Jim, do you have any comments or?
I have feelings about this, but I unfortunately was not at the last meeting, so I don't.
Well, I mean, pretty much as
I don't know the rest of it all, but I kind of agree with maybe what Mary's saying, that there should be some cap at some point. It shouldn't just be open-ended. In the 2009 requirement seems fair. Like I said, I wasn't the last meeting. I don't know off the top of my head when they bought the property. So I don't know if that was before 2009 or after that.
Well, you moved in, Killens moved in prior to 2009, correct?
They moved in June of 2011. It was-
It was after.
So,
Gotcha.
so that 2009 report.
Remember, it's not Killens who's,
Yeah,
Right.
you know, it's the land owner, so.
sure.
Well, why don't we go through our checklist, real quick. Well, first thing, will strict compliance with the dimensional requirements of the zoning ordinance prevent the applicant from using the property for the permitted purpose. Variance is granted for circumstances unique to the property, not those unique to the owner.
I don't think it prevents them, but it certainly hinders them. Because if they're not able to get people there to work, then that changes capacity, it changes production. So I think it is certainly a difficulty. Even if it isn't an actual, bar to what they're doing. So I still see it as a practical difficulty.
My reading of that provision would, I don't think that, it does not support the variance request.
Yeah, I agree. Just, the language of that, not granting the variance does not prohibit them from using the property.
Is there a way to accomplish the same purpose without the variance or with a lesser variance regardless of convenience or expense? The ZBA considers the property, not issues with the interior of the structure.
That's where I think maybe it does support the variance. If they join the parcels and what Lisa said about not being allowed to park on vacant land. That, I think that one does possibly support the variance. But there's, not another way. Otherwise.
I liked Mary's comment about the exploration of alternatives on the parking itself. If it's an issue, let's incentivize our employees to carpool or we'll run a small shuttle from another parcel. But possibly on that, there could be a condition if board is going to approve it with that stipulation.
Okay. Is the need for the variance due to a situation that is unique to the property and would not generally be found elsewhere in the same zoning district? If the situation is often repeated in the same zoning district, then the variance request should be denied.
I don't know that we have enough information
Yeah,
to answer
yeah.
that question.
I don't know how relevant
It is
that
really.
one is.
I think just in the fact, the amount of parking that they're requiring, it does make them kind of unique in this area because it's just not a common thing.
Right. If granted, will the variance uphold the spirit and intent of the ordinance and be fair to the neighboring properties? There are reasons the ordinance was adopted and those reasons should be respected and upheld.
Well, interestingly enough, if we grant a variance, it seems that it would be a better situation for the neighbors by not having parking down on that lower lot. Which that may be a moot point because it may be improper anyway, so it may not be required by the variance. But certainly the granting of it would allow those vehicles to move elsewhere.
Right. Well, and I think even the removal of some vacant and somewhat dilapidated buildings was gonna possibly improve the area.
I think this factor is 1704. The action would undercut the spirit or intent of 1704 of let's not expand parking under those circumstances.
Last, has the need for the variance been created through previous action of the applicant? The appeals board is not responsible for bailing out an applicant who created the need for a variance.
I would say no. I mean, it's court's variance. This was not anything the applicant did or didn't do.
I know it's an unusual position to take, but it does seem to me that the applicant could foresee the parking issues as it continued to expand and expand and expand its production staff, its office staff, and therefore not foreseeing that, not making better business calculations decisions that let's put production at the site south of Petoskey or some other location. They have, I'm not faulting the prosperity that came with their growth, or however we want to phrase it. At the same time, managing that expansion is and where it occurs certainly within our city to expand to busting capacity or busting level, and therefore we need these variances. I put some of the responsibility on the applicant for, let's say, those business calculations to expand to that level at this site, and for as opposed to some alternative site, keeping this site at some level of production, but knowing we've got to do something else at another site to continue our growth. So with that being said, I do think that there's some level of responsibility for the creation of, we'll call it the practical difficulty. And for that reason, I don't think that on this factor, it doesn't support the variance request.
Okay,
Yeah, I think also remembering the applicant is the landowner, not Kilwins.
Anyone have any other thoughts? Anyone want to work on
I would make a motion,
motion?
but I need just a second to jot it down.
Mhm.
Oh, thank you. Okay. In case number 869, I move to approve a parking variance of a total of 159 parking spaces at 1050 Bayview Road with the conditions and modifications that this parking plan will be reviewed by the Planning Commission. And then in so doing, the Planning Commission will also consider the language of section 1704 sub 6, which addresses the issue of the consideration and concern that excessive areas of pavement contribute to higher rates of stormwater runoff. This is based on the findings of fact that the property in question has been owned well prior to the current cap on parking spaces, and that a cap on parking spaces may not have been anticipated when the property was purchased, or even when Kilwins entered into their negotiations to take on the property. I believe that the change in the ordinance is a practical difficulty in this case. That I do think that there is a lesser way and a lesser variance, and hence the number 159 rather than the 181 requested, on the grounds that they may be able to find other alternate means to get their people to work. I do think that this will uphold the spirit and intent of the ordinance, in that it will move parking and consolidate it into one location and remove the non-permissive parking that's existing now. And that this has not been created through the action of the applicant. And that this would not cause substantial detriment to the public good or substantially impair the intent and purpose of the ordinance.
We have a second.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Can we?
Brown,
No.
Clinton,
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Nibbs,
I abstain.
Shaw North,
Yes.
motion fails.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
procedural issue.
Mhm.
The only reason why a member can abstain is if they have a conflict of interest.
Okay.
I do not see a conflict of interest, and Mr. Gibbs was provided the same information that the Planning Commission had at its previous meeting, which was repeated this evening. So I don't see any standing at this point for an abstention on this issue.
So is he compelled to?
He's compelled, in my opinion, he's compelled to vote.
Okay, well, I only abstained because I wasn't at the previous meeting and didn't hear any of the,
You heard, trust me, you heard.
everything. Based on what I need, tonight, I would vote yes.
Okay, so that's 4-1 vote, motion carried.
I'm just curious, as a procedural question. If it had been 3-1, would it have been,
It would have been denied.
Denied.
it would have been denied? That's what I thought, because we had to have quorum of the board, not quorum of those attending, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Okay, moving on. Yes.
So we asked for 49 parking spaces, so you voted no on our request, is that true?
No, you asked for 49 and they're granting you 27.
So it's no on 49.
No on 49, yes on 27.
Okay, so in other words, no on our request.
No on your request, but their approval was they're willing to give you an additional 27.
Okay, so we're not, this is not a yes or no. This is not an approval process. This is a negotiation.
No, it's not a negotiation. I don't want to speak for the ZBA, but I think their
And
decision.
what we are saying is that we have listened to what you have said, and given the strict requirements that we have to follow to decide if a variance can be granted, we have determined that you are entitled to a variance, but that it is not as great as the one you requested.
So you just said no to the one we requested.
Yes, correct. We granted you a lesser, we granted you a variance.
No to the one we requested.
That's correct.
Yes, but we did grant a variance.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
There's no need to rehabilitate the lot to the east.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
There's no need to rehabilitate the lot to the east, because there's already 30 some parking there.
Oh, okay.
So that means the day in this business building, the top end stays looking just like it is.
Okay, I choice.
Okay, now we are on to, well. Case 870, 871, and 872, they're all very similar requests, so I'd like to kind of. We'll do a vote for each of the three cases individually, but let's
I think
just
we could
discuss.
substantively
They're
deal with
very
a single one.
similar. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyway, Lisa, do you want to give us a little background in this, please?
Sure, so as you saw in your packet, these three parcels the parcels themselves were established as early as 1919. As you can see in that Sanborn map that was provided, there were structures existing on the alley side of those three parcels back in 1919. They have been modified since or eliminated, and other structures have been rebuilt. Those have been verified to be in existence as of at least 1959, which supersedes the current ordinance, which was adopted in 1974. So essentially, the applicant is requesting that these three parcels be permitted to be split to create two separate single-family dwelling parcels. Doing so creates non-conforming parcels as they do not meet the minimum requirement for lot area. However, if you look at section 1702(2) on non-conforming lots, it is staff's determination that they should be granted as they cannot be. The ordinance cannot restrict them because they were pre-existing and predating the current ordinance.
Okay.
So I did go through and give you checklists as far as lot A and lot B for each one of those parcels, what's existing, what is allowed, and what is proposed. With those calculations, ironically, the biggest thing will be those setbacks. They don't exceed lot coverage, which is usually a huge variance request that we see. The setbacks are already non-conforming as they currently are. So splitting those parcels does not increase that non-conformity. And it actually decreases the non-conformity in the sense that it takes a non-conforming lot with two single-family dwellings, because currently the ordinance only allows attached single-family dwellings, and these are detached. So that would actually bring them into be less non-conforming in a sense, I guess.
And I know the applicant had stated in their request, and this makes sense to me, but I just want to confirm that it's true, that because these are a single owner currently, it's fine. It's just one person owns both these two houses on a given lot, but to allow individual owners to purchase them, they would have to be split.
Correct.
Okay, so that's, I assumed that was the case, but that was the big premise, and that's an important piece, so thank you.
Okay, do we have someone who wants to speak on behalf of the applicant?
Good evening, Adam Cross on behalf of Blackthorn LLC and the Harold Baird Jr. Trust, the various owners of these three parcels. Kind of just piggybacking off what Lisa said, it's a pretty straightforward request with more favorable ordinance language on this case than the previous case. But actually, can we skip ahead a couple slides? Benchmark Engineering put together.
Actually, you want the,
Oh, sorry.
sorry, I don't have your drawings up here. Let me.
Like Lisa said, the lots have been there since probably, I don't know when it was platted, probably before 1919. The 1919 map showed structures and if you look on that first Sanborn map, on the southern boundary of the parcels, it looks like there's outbuildings or some garage or something. Those were replaced by the current structures that are there, single family homes that have been existing since prior to zoning. And so really what we're asking to do is just to get a variance to be able to split those lots. Because the applicants are looking to sell these properties, they're rental properties right now. And they think they could do better by, getting this variance, following the ordinance as it's written. And rather than selling a two parcel or a 2-house parcel to a investment company that's just gonna turn them into rentals or whatever, they can, attract a different audience. First,
Including our renters.
including the renters, yeah, first time home buyers that could afford to buy one home, but can't afford to buy a home in an investment property or an investment property. And so we came to the city with the idea of maybe doing a condo project here, turning it into a condo development with an association. The city didn't like that idea, but quickly had this idea and said, hey, if these things existed prior to zoning, prior to the ordinance, they may be, permitted. This might be a good use for the variance to just split these lots and make them less non-conforming. So that's where we're at.
Can I get that map up?
I'm trying. It's buried in here.
Yeah, it's deep and there's one. I think that one's pretty blurry. But
They have these in their packets.
yeah, we all have. And
Yeah, we have copies.
And if you can see, with the exception of the parcel, was it 319? Everything else remains the same. 319, we'd have to shift the fence line approximately 5 feet north to encompass that garage for the southern lot or new lot. But everything else, nothing changes. You drive by this place and you wouldn't know there's 6 lots or 3 lots. It's essentially treated it as 6 lots since before these folks bought it, and you guys have owned it since the late 70s, is that right? Roughly, yeah. And we Taya did put together a nice sandwich board to kind of.
If you could come to the mic and just say your name and your address.
Name, Taya Baird. Address is 1693 Horton Bay Road. And I am one of the members of Blackthorn LLC. My husband Will is the other member. My husband and his sister are the owners of the Harold Baird Trust properties. What I wanted to point out to you as far as the look of the neighborhood is the cross sections on each of these parcels. Those fence lines have been there since before we purchased those properties. I mean, this neighborhood is very cohesive and every property is separated by fences. And if you look at the chart that I create or the board that I created for you, it's a beautiful neighborhood. The houses are all of similar design. And it works. The difficulty has come in when we now want to transition away from renting. And for us, it's a hard thing to do because these renters have been our family. And now they have an interest in purchasing their homes. And we can't offer them their homes because we can't sell them half of a property. And that's the situation that we're trying to remedy. Where we have been able to do it, we have sold our renters their homes. We've got 2 properties that we have sold to renters. They have, this makes them
first-time home buyers and has given them an opportunity that may not have been available otherwise, especially in the, situation that we have right now as far as housing goes. For us to sell these properties, we may have to displace people as well. That's not what we want to do. So, I hope the board gives you some sense of the look of the neighborhood and, our renters have taken really good care of their properties. We've taken good care of the properties and we would like to see that continue. It's been, it's my father and mother-in-law's legacy. My husband and I have owned these properties along with them for many, many years. They have passed. We'd just like to see it not be turned into something unpleasant. Some landlords don't take care of their places. This is the best that I can say. Well, any questions?
Yeah. Is the plan to? Mr. Chairman. Is your plan to? Seek the division of each of the lots, so. Sell the homes on each lot. Does that extinguish your corporate entity by now we're done with all of this? Or
No,
do you still have other properties?
Yes, we have other properties.
Okay. So you're not seeking to just close up shop and go move to Florida or wherever.
We're not moving to Florida.
I wouldn't either. I don't know. And maybe the staff could tell, could there be a transfer, a sale of their interest in these full 3 lots to a third party without any need for variances?
That's not something the city would get involved in. That's up to the property owner.
I mean,
I don't know if they could sell a portion of their business. That's a business transaction. So not something the city would be involved in.
And I can answer that question. You cannot sell an interest in a trust.
was this in a trust or an
The
LLC?
2 of these properties are in a trust.
Okay.
One of them is in an
Yeah,
LLC.
I understand.
I have a question just regarding the properties that have access from the alley. Is there any problem with that as far as,
Sorry, I didn't know it turned off. Is there any problem with just having alley access as far as like fire trucks, emergency vehicles? Is there something that limits that?
That is a maintained alley. It is a
Okay,
city
so it's wide
maintained alley.
enough, accessible enough. Okay, so there's nothing on the books that
Not that I'm
says
aware
it's
of,
not. Okay,
and obviously been in existence for.
right, but
Many
since it
years,
was technically
but
one
yes.
parcel, it could have been an oversight. Okay,
Yeah, and the city has always been very responsive to maintaining the alley.
okay, good.
Any other questions for the applicant?
So basically, these have been operating like single family residences, but they have been hamstrung by the fact that they are in a single deed and single ownership for purposes of separating them to sell to individual parties.
Yes, we have always run into single families and we have long-term renters. And
Could I add something? Adam Cross again. I'd just like to add that what you said is absolutely true, and the the hardship or the problem is before 1978 or whenever this ordinance was. 74, they could have split these and sold off 2 lots. So the hardship is the enactment of the ordinance. It says, okay, now. Here's the dimensions that it needs to be, and these parcels as they exist now existed exactly like that prior to the ordinance. And so that's why we're seeking variance. You could sell 1 lot with 2 houses, sure, but prior to the ordinance, they could have sold 2 houses. They could have been divided. So it's the ordinance that caused the difficulty.
But I think you can see that with the lots on either end of the block. Because the lot on the right is a single lot, but it's been split into 3 parcels. On the left, it's a single lot, but it's been split into 2 parcels. And they have full homes on them. And again, they're all divided by fences.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant? All right, any public comment?
And Mike Shibley,
Pick it again.
pick it again.
Yeah.
My name's Mike Shibley, so I'm first, 323 Madison. So I'm one of the first time buyers that they're talking about. So I purchased 323 and 327 on there. And if anybody else wants to, if one of them homes comes available to buy, like for one of my sons, whatever, he'd have to buy both houses. So anybody that comes in there, it's only going to attract one type of buyer in that neighborhood. So they're going to have to own both houses. So I'm just here to support it, being able to be switched up so somebody can buy one single house. All right, that's it.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Oh, I forgot to ask last time. There's no one online, is there? All right. All right, we will now bring it back to the board and discuss. Anyone have any thoughts?
No, I commend trying, what you're doing for, the housing situation and first time home buyers. I understand the restriction with the setbacks, but I think those are common in that neighborhood that people have smaller setbacks. So I don't think it's going to be a detriment or, change the character of the neighborhood at all. I think, the restrictions are things that are all existing.
I agree. This is really just a paperwork change in effect that will allow people to become homeowners, which is probably what it was in the day when they were built. Oh, sorry. I usually talk loud enough. It's probably not a problem, but anyway. So anyways, that's what I was saying. I think this is more of a paperwork change than anything that's a substantive change in terms of changes to the neighborhood or to the community. And I like the idea that it will free up the property to allow individual owners to have these and really turn it back to being a neighborhood as it was probably when it was built.
I agree with that.
I do too.
I do too. So. Let's, I don't think we have to spend too much time debating this since we.
We still need to do the checklist or can?
I don't see much reason if, well, let's just do it. We'll just do it once and,
Apply it in each
apply it
case.
all.
Yeah, okay.
All right. First, will strict compliance with the dimensional requirements of the zoning ordinance prevent the applicant from using the property for a permitted purpose? A variance is granted for circumstances unique to the property, not those unique to the owner.
I think that does support the variance.
Yes,
I agree.
wow.
Could you turn on your?
Does it turn off automatically?
It does, yeah.
All right. All right, is there a way to accomplish the same purpose without a variance or with a lesser variance regardless of convenience or expense? The ZBA considers the property not issues with the interior of the structure.
No, I mean, it's a finite parcel with two houses on it. There, I mean, you may decide you're gonna move the line somewhere different, but it's, no matter where we move it, both of them will still be non-conforming.
Right.
And they already have the divide in the most logical
Exactly.
spots for each of the three
Right.
lots, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Is the need for the variance due to a situation that is unique to the property and would not generally be found elsewhere in the same zoning district? If the situation is often repeated in the same zoning district, then the variance request should be denied.
Well, it's not often repeated because clearly some of the properties were split before the ordinance came into effect. So this is really just a vestige of those that remained.
Yeah.
So,
It's consistent with what's around.
yeah,
This is a very unique property.
yes.
If granted, will the variance uphold the spirit and intent of the ordinance and be fair to the neighboring properties? There are reasons for the ordinance. There are reasons the ordinance was adopted, and those reasons should be respected in the public. I mean,
Agreed.
I think it
It will.
keeps
Yeah,
the neighborhood just the way it is.
exactly.
And last, has the need for the variance been created through previous action of the applicant? The appeals board is not responsible for bailing out an applicant who created the need for a variance. See if that. All right.
So for the record, that analysis applies to each of the cases, 870, 871, and 872.
Yeah, the only difference is gonna be the amount of variance in our, I mean, we can almost, you know. Are you working on?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Yeah, that's the only difference between the three. Right.
I have a motion.
Oh,
Be perfect. I'll coordinate.
In case 871, I move to approve the following variances to allow parcel split at 315 Madison Street. Parcel number 52-19-06 and 127-073. 315 Madison Street, lot 4A, a lot area variance of 2,903.71 square feet to create a 4,296.29 square foot parcel that measures 50.09 along the north property line, 86.55 along the east property line, and 50.01 along the south property line, and 85.13 along the west property line. That's for lot 4A. 315 Madison Street, lot 4B, a lot area variance of 4,003.10 square feet to create a 3,196.90 square foot parcel that measures 49.96 feet along the south property line, 62.16 feet along the west property line, 50.01 along the north property line, and a 61.86 along the east property line. Based on the findings of fact with the submitted material that the structures pre-existed the city zoning ordinance and have been utilized in this fashion for over 100 years. And by comments provided by the applicant and the applicant's representative that demonstrate there is a practical difficulty created by section 1600 of the zoning ordinance, and that the proposed changes are not contrary to the intent of the ordinance and would not cause substantial detriment to the public good or substantially impair the intent and purpose of the ordinance. That practical difficulty being that these structures have existed for many years in this application and would not benefit the community to deny the request.
Support.
all right, we have a motion and a second. Now, you did, yours was case 871, so you went for the one in the middle. Okay, so, all right.
We duplicate it.
That was an easy one.
We can take a vote.
Thank you. Hendricks,
Support.
Nibbs,
Yes.
Shawno,
Yes.
Brown,
Yeah.
Clinton,
Yes,
motion carries.
All right, why don't we do 870 this time? Does someone else want to do this one or
I think
or
it'd be
did you already do all of
good.
them?
Shouldn't the language be consistent?
Yeah, it'd be the same language and just substitute the dimensions of the property and the address. Does that work or not?
Can we make a motion to
I'm okay with that. It's all.
just say that in case 72? We would we would duplicate the motion in 871 with the exception of the lots, numbers and sizes and property numbers. And then we vote on it. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay,
Let's do it.
all right, then I'll do that one. Okay. In the matter of 872, I move to approve the variance requested by the applicant for the same reasons as set forth in our approved motion in the case of 871, with the exception of changing the property number, the address, and the specific dimensions of the properties for the same reasons as indicated before.
I'll support or second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Let's take a vote.
Brown,
Yeah.
Clinton,
Yes,
Hendricks,
Yes.
Nibbs,
Yes.
Shawno,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right. And lastly, 870, same.
Yeah.
Same.
in the matter of case 870, I move that we approve the variance requested. I can't remember what it's for the same reasons as articulated in our approved motions in cases 871 and 872. Again, for the same reasons as articulated there, with the exception of changing to reflect the correct property number, street addresses, and the dimensions of the two lots to be created.
No, second.
All right.
Brown,
Yes.
Clinton,
Yes,
Hendricks,
Yes.
Nibbs,
Yes.
Shawno,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay. You are granted all your variances. Okay.
thank you for taking this move.
Yeah. All right.
Is there anything else on our?
Any public comment? I'm guessing no.
Public is leaving.
Yeah. Updates. Any updates?
The only thing I wanted to let everyone know, for those that weren't here earlier, before you was the zoning ordinance updated. Bill, you just got yours, so yours is as current as it can be, so I didn't leave you one. So if you want to replace what's in your binder with what you were given. And then the
And I
two on
think
top.
just throw out the old stuff and
The old
put the
one
new
back
stuff
in
in.
there.
Thank
And
you
the
for
two,
doing that.
Ordinances on top are amendments that were made in 22 that have not been codified in our online version, so
Okay,
those need to be referenced to when referencing those districts.
Any news on the Brent's property?
You have not. Fronts. I've not been by there recently.
I drove by there this past weekend.
It's
It
still.
looks the same.
Which property are you referring to?
It's a case that we ruled on, I forget when. It's been a
Been a
while
year,
now.
quite over a year, yeah.
Michigan.
Yeah, Michigan.
Michigan Street.
No, nothing's happened on it.
Gentleman
No.
wants to say something.
Oh, I'm sorry. Terry, did you?
I just to say thank you and both of your city people here have been extraordinarily helpful, and I would also appreciate the passage because we have, as my wife mentioned, sold some of the other properties to first-time home buyers, and it's usually taken 2 to 3 days. I mean, there's such a need in the area. And our properties aren't in the $400,000 to $600,000 range, and I really want to thank you for it. And these two have been extraordinarily helpful in helping educate us to get where we are today to put this before you. So thanks.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a time limit for him to remove the structure?
Yes, that has come and gone, especially
far
at this point, the end of June, I believe.
Okay.
Late June is when he had to comply. So civil infraction will be the next course of action.
What is the next step? In the correction?
Civil infraction,
So that's like a warning, a fine.
ticket, a fine.
Okay.
Mhm. Yep. And then that's ongoing until it's rectified.
What is the amount and is there a fine?
There is, I'd have to look. I want to say it's $100, but I believe that goes every day.
Oh,
That's
But it's
usually
not
how those are.
compliant.
If it's an ongoing violation, it's usually assessed by day.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'd have to look at the fee schedule and see how that's listed out. I did want to just remind you, you all got your email, but the August meeting has been canceled.
Oh,
No agenda items for that meeting.
All right.
So,
and I will not be here for if we have anything in September.
you will not be, okay. And if we do, I will bring the 2024 meeting schedule to that meeting.
Perfect.
We'll get it in your packet.
Thank you.
Any comments or anything, if you want to give those to me prior to the meeting, I can share those.
Okay.
Are we getting any more members for the ZBA?
I have put in my request. I've put in my
Oh,
request.
okay.
With Rory's departure. Yeah, I know it just takes time and I don't know how,
Wasn't there was one guy, did he not want to do it or?
Matt McSweeney.
Yeah.
He actually transitioned to the planning commission.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
So, so Bill has filled his seat
okay.
and then now we wait for someone to fill.
Because
Rory's.
how many,
There are 6 with 1 alternate.
okay. Which is unusual, because usually
Odd.
boards sit in odd numbers.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
see, our new chairperson does a wonderful job.
Oh, so I'm just glad it's over.
Congrats the first one, your first
Yeah.
meeting on here.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, no.
Thank you.
problem. It's not that bad.
We just need a motion for.
Oh, yeah.
Scott, wasn't Scott the?
Second,
no,
anyone?
alternate. I will second it.
All right, all those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Okay.
I think so. Is Scott still the alternate?
Yes.
Yeah.
The judge used a little more vigor.